just to confirm that, but I know there's always a delay.
Uh-huh.
So welcome everybody to our first YouTube live series. This is Greg McDonough. I'm the host of the Chief Endurance Officer podcast, and we're branching out into YouTube live to develop and deliver content for our audience. We are at the start of a 4-week series. This 4-week series, we're focusing on sort of the newer endurance athlete. Those of us that are training for the summer half and long distance triathlons. So we're doing a series today. We're going to talk about some goal setting. Next week, we're going to talk about swimming. The following week, we're talking about nutrition. And then the following week, we're talking about cycling. So again, little tidbits to help those of us that are a little bit more experienced shed some light on the audience for your endeavor for the next handful of months. So today's guest, again, Caroline Miller. She's a best-selling author, motivational speaker, globally recognized in the goal setting. Just published a book called Big Goals. You can see the image behind you. I've got a copy here to my left. Caroline, welcome to our live session.
Hey, thanks, Greg. This is a great idea. I'm so glad you're doing it.
It's for those of you who don't know, most of you probably don't. Caroline and I go back, I don't know, 15 some odd years. In
At
fact,
least, yeah.
there's 2 women in my life that were involved when I started doing endurance sports, and it's you and my wife, Monique, and we were both at the Masters swim program. This was pre-kids,
Yep.
everything.
Yep.
But anyway,
Pre
so
your
thanks.
kids. Pre your kids.
Right.
Yeah.
Pre-marriage? It could have been great. But Caroline, I'd love to give you the stage a little bit and talk about your athletic background. You're a master swimmer, you're black belt in a handful of different disciplines, but just give the audience a little bit of sense of who you are.
Sure. Well, I grew up in DC. I was a competitive swimmer. I come from a family where there was a lot of athletic accomplishments that I would never, ever replicate. Olympic gold medalists, silver medalists, bronze medalists, world record holders, 1912 Olympics. Anyway, in 1908. So I went to college. I was still a competitive swimmer, but anyone who knows my background knows that my eating disorder took it away from me. So bulimia. And so I went back to swimming in my early 40s because I decided to go back to everything that I had lost to my eating disorder. And I think I'm fitter, healthier, happier now because I do the martial arts. I got a black belt in Aikido. I swim, which is how we met. I lift weights a lot, but I do believe that this is the optimal way to live is to include exercise, particularly effortful exercise, not strolling, although I think that's got its place. And so you and I have really bonded over going out of our comfort zone to do hard things. So that's what I believe in. I think that's what you live every day, and that's what you bring to your podcast. So thank you for
100%.
including me. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So let's jump right into it. We've got a first-time Ironman, long-distance triathlete, endurance athlete listening to this, looking to set both short and long-term goals that are challenging but realistic. Could you sort of walk through a process? I'll leave it at that and see where that takes us.
So if you're a first-time endurance athlete, you're in what's called a learning goal condition. So I work with goal setting theory, Locke and Latham's goal setting theory. Just by the way, it's ranked #1 of 73 management theories for its importance and its impact. So it's very important to understand that there are goals you've done before, like you've done multiple Ironmans, which is what's called a performance or checklist goal. And I will call it a checklist goal from now on, because as you're training, you have a checklist. I'll do this, this, this. I know it works for me. Here's how I eat. Here's how early I get to a competition, etc. First-time athletes, what I want to say is what you need to do is learn as much as you can from other people who are like you, maybe your same age group. Are you a man or a woman? You want to interview people who have done what you are wanting to accomplish, and then begin to experiment with, well, does my body do better in these shoes or those shoes? Do I need a better bike or a different kind of bike? If I'm swimming, do I need to take swimming lessons in total immersion? So you're in the process of experimenting with different ways to succeed at your goal when it's the first time, which means, what does it mean? What's the importance? It means you cannot hold yourself to a specific time outcome or a certain excellence outcome because you're experimenting with how to do it. So the first time goal would be maybe to finish. Or if you want to be aggressive and you're pretty sure because you've been an athlete before that you could finish in, let's say 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, maybe set a very generous time goal. But learning goals are do your best in some ways, just set a goal to learn. So that's what's important about first time goals.
You know, it brings up some ideas in my training, right? I find that by the time I get to race day, I've kind of have an expectation. Um, but that expectation gets thrown out the window like the first time I jump in the water and somebody punches my goggles or I bump
Yeah.
into the buoy or so I'd get it a little bit broader on like in the moment. It's like, I'll give you the example, right? I show up to race day and I think, hey, I'm going to do this in 14 hours. And then I get probably 30 minutes into my swim and I go, you know what? I'm not having a very good swim or my stomach doesn't feel well or
Right.
and then you start second guessing yourself. And what I've learned over the years, and a lot of it through your coaching, is you kind of just got to let the day be the day,
Unfold.
right?
Yeah.
Because you need it. You've done the work. If you've done the work, you've had the tough days at training. So just let the day be the day. But give us a little bit more scientific sort of explanation of that. Of like by the time you get to the starting line,
Mhm.
like in the moment, goal adjusting and having your expectations and being light on yourself.
It's such a good point because in my book, you're in my book, Big Goals, but so is Dennis Crean, who swam the English Channel, I think a year ago. And there were so many variables about swimming the English Channel. You reserve your spot a year or two ahead of time, you pay thousands of dollars, and it could be terrible weather. It could be all kinds of situations you weren't able to train in. And I asked him, how would you define excellence if you can't finish? How would you define excellence if
Mm.
something came up that you couldn't prepare for? And he said, my definition of excellence would be that I gave it everything I had and I did as much training as was necessary to actually accomplish the swim based on what I knew about my abilities, other people who worked with me, et cetera, et cetera. But you're also talking about a mindset issue. And so in my bridge methodology, which I add on to goal setting theory, is it's really important to do what the ancient Stoics talked about. B is brainstorming. The ancient Stoics said when you're setting out on a big goal or a journey of some kind, premeditate the evils, premeditatio
Mm.
malorum, premeditate the evils that could come. And in order to succeed at anything, you have got to brainstorm how many things can go wrong. And this is where people just fail miserably on goal accomplishment is they don't take the time to look at a strategy and say, what will I do if this happens? What will I do if that happens? I think we both know the famous Michael Phelps story about how his coach figured that he would have busted goggles in at least one race. So he stepped on them before Michael Phelps swam a race. So Michael Phelps would know, oh, this is how you swim a race when your goggles are busted. So it's really important to try to think through what you would do and where will you go in your brain when you want to quit, right? Every athlete I've ever interviewed tells me they have a pain cave of some kind. And so I think race day, you've got to be ready with premeditated scenarios. And then also, if something happens that I didn't expect, what will be my first reaction, second reaction, third reaction? Because your body will obey your brain.
And do you recommend spelling those out? You know, because my experience is through trial and error, right? So by the time
Mhm.
I get to race day, I know and have experienced injuries. I've experienced dehydration. I've
Right.
failed on my nutrition plan. You know, like these big factors that kind of come into race day or could be these, you know, premeditated evils.
Yeah.
Um, Go a little bit further on like how deep we should be in sort of the step 1, 2, and 3 after like spelling those out.
I think as deep as you can possibly be. And this is what we saw when COVID hit, when black swan events happen, unpredictable kind of disaster scenarios, which we can personalize and say it's unpredictable and a disaster for us. The companies that did the best were the ones that had playbooks for disasters. They were the
Mm.
ones that had thought through, well, what happens if the internet goes down all over the world? What happens if the way we deliver yoga pants is suddenly got, out? We can't, there are no drones available, whatever. So the companies that were able to pivot quickly because they had a playbook for disaster are the ones that have done really well. People are the same. And so that's why the brainstorming needs to be done so well. and go as deep as you can. And then you'll learn as you go through other scenarios. Maybe I should have asked myself this question. So in big goals, there's a list of questions that take you way outside your comfort zone to think of different ways that things could go wrong or things could go right. And that's another way you have to consider what could happen.
Absolutely. Just a little side note. So for those that are watching, please screenshot this conversation and post it on Instagram and tag the Chief Endurance Officer podcast. If you do that, I'll DM you and find your address and send you this fun little hat. So,
oh, cool.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. So again, screenshot what we're doing, put it up on Instagram, tag the Chief Endurance Officer podcast, and I'll get you a hat. Caroline, go into, again, just a little bit deeper into sort of, these long distance races, it takes, especially a new athlete, it's a year process, right? If you really want to sort of have a good day. And there's a lot of sort of motivation, and there's a lot of mornings that you don't want to get up and you don't want to get on your bike and nobody's watching. How can we sort of maintain that motivation over a 1 year period?
Such a good question. So it's going to require grit, long-term goals, especially ones that demand physical strength, emotional courage, passion. These require grit. And so grit has humility baked into it. So one thing to prepare yourself is to be humble enough to ask other people, what would you do to stay motivated? Can you give me some ideas? Ultimately, passion is individual, though. And so people have different ways of keeping themselves motivated. One is very specific kinds of vision boards, but caveat, you don't want to spend too much time looking at a vision board, because research shows that if you imagine the future too much, positive fantasizing, you can start to believe you've done more work than you've done. So that's one way. Other people have priming words all over their environments. I remember Dan Jansen, the speed skater, when he was preparing for, I want to say the 92 Olympics, he fell in the 88 Olympics at the start, and he was the world favorite. He had, I love the 800-meter skeet skater, the 1500, he had Post-it notes everywhere on his car, in his mirror, everywhere. And so you want to do that. Third thing I'll say is really guard the circle of people who are around you, because their comments can be very negative, starting to doubt, well, have you really trained enough? You look a little bit too heavy to be doing a race like that. Don't you think you should lose more weight? Or, gosh, I've never seen a woman as old as you do anything like this. What makes you think you have it inside of you? So this is something I talked about in Big Goals. Dara Torres, who won a silver medal in the 2008 Olympics in Beijing in swimming, the 50-meter freestyle, you were not allowed in her presence if you didn't believe she could win a medal at the Olympics at the age of 41. And she guarded her space so hugely that you just couldn't get. So you got to guard the conversations, the words, the emails you get. So be very thoughtful about who deserves to be in your presence when you're doing something hard.
So can you give us an example of how you apply that in the hard things that you're doing?
Yeah. So there is research that tells you exactly who should be in your circle and who shouldn't. And I take it very seriously when I create my own bubble. And it's, are people curious and enthusiastic when you're actually pursuing something really difficult, or doing anything really, celebrating a success? And if people aren't curious and enthusiastic, they're generally not in my friend group. They're generally not in my acquaintance group. So I guard myself very carefully. I share my goals with a mastermind group. I share my goals with people who I know love me and have my back. And so I do that very carefully. I also just was telling you before we came on that the Rehoboth Beach Marathon was last weekend. I haven't run in years and years and years. And somebody challenged me to start running again. So I started, but I'm not stupid. I reached out to find again, it's a learning goal for me at this age. I reached out to find out, when people with my medical conditions or whatever it is, how do you train for a 9K that's going to be in 1 year? So I'm doing exactly what I tell other people to do. It's a learning goal. Reach out to people who have the knowledge you need in order to flatten your learning curve and create a plan and a strategy. So that's how I do it. That's how I do everything, really.
The community is such an important aspect of this, and not just the larger community, those that you're going to be racing with, but your spouse, your family, your kids. I mean, it becomes a commitment. Like it's hard on a Saturday morning when you've got a 5 hour bike
Right.
ride to look at your kids that are going off to soccer games and say, sorry, I've made this choice.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
any insight, any thoughts there? Like how it, having goals
Yeah.
and drive and motivation and wanting to get to the finish line, the starting line, whichever, um, you got to be selfish at times,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's a hard emotion to feel.
It is, and yet it's almost like an arranged marriage. Once you choose a goal that's personal to you, that's not someone else's goal for you, that's where the passion and grit comes in. And I think you have to get to a point where you're not looking back. You're not saying, will I, won't I? You lock in like it's an arranged marriage. It's like, I don't have a choice to look backwards. I remember reading in Yoga Journal once that the way someone had created an incredible practice is she absolutely refused to ask herself, will I, won't I get on the mat today? I also think that the people who love you and support you need to know what your goal is and why you're pursuing it, and you ask for their support. But at the same time, you have to motivate yourself all the time. And I have found that people who commit the night before to doing something hard the next day usually do better, because there's research showing that in your brain, you kind of coalesce the thoughts and feelings and mindset to get up and do the thing you commit to the night before. And I think you and I have talked about it's all about the night before, right?
100%. In fact, in fact, I'm doing it now. I've got a long bike ride on my calendar for tomorrow, and I've got my bike off the trainer. I'm putting on the wheels. I've got my helmet out. Like it's all about that preparation. Because if I
Interesting.
try to do it tomorrow morning,
Right.
maybe it won't get done. Maybe I won't get on the saddle. It is all about the night before, and it's interesting, Caroline, because um, when I race, I think the finish line of my race is actually the starting line of the next race. And so
Oh,
it's this
that's how you conceive of it?
100%. I've got
Oh, wow.
about 10 minutes of emotional with the family, happy I finished. Maybe I hit my time, maybe I didn't, but I'm already on to, all right, what's next year's race? What's next the event? And so to me, it's really not a finish line, right? It's just an ongoing thing. It's a lifestyle.
That that is really interesting. I've never heard you say that. But people who are really gritty never rest on their laurels for too long. They're always looking to challenge themselves again. But I think you're also saying that in the midst of an Ironman day, as you're finishing the swim, 10 minutes before the swim is over, you're already saying, well, it's not the finish of something, it's really the start of something else that's coming. And that helps you.
100%.
That's
100%.
really, really interesting. Um, I know that when I have to go to swim practice and I don't want to go, which is, I wake up and I think, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. I really don't want to go. I don't want to go. And I think of all these reasons not to go. And then I walk out to my car and all the swim stuff is there. And I know my friends are waiting for me at that pool. And so sometimes if you just start walking and walking forward and you've done what you've done, you've laid out the helmet, the this, the that, it's that much easier to get there. But when you think about people who succeed, they remove obstacles, as many as possible. It's like hiding
Mhm.
the candy behind a cabinet door instead of having it out in public. They found that people eat less candy if they hide it. Duh. But that's kind of the way you look at it.
Um, yeah, you got me thinking about the removing obstacles. And if there's another follow-up question there, but um, I'll pivot a little bit, Caroline, and talk about developing an endurance mindset. I'd love to hear your sort of short term, how do you get started? Long term, how do you maintain it? A lot of that content we've
Hmm.
kind of touched on
Hmm.
already, but I'd
Hmm.
love to get a little bit more specific on sort of that endurance mindset and really what that means to you.
Oh, what is it? I'll start with what it means to me. What it means to me is that when I choose to do hard things, I find a way to finish them. And everyone has a different way of finishing them. This is what Angela Duckworth's research was so interesting about. She found that even kids as young as 9, 10, 11 developed mindsets of grit, which were, I may not get to the final round of the spelling bee, but if I do my best, I might have what's called the psychology of the near miss. I'll just take it as a stepping stone, not a fall, and I'll, go home and do more work. But people who have grit gamify the training, gamify the mindset. They find ways to keep going. And so I think what it is first of all, you have to ask yourself, why am I doing this thing? You better come up with a very personal gut level reason why you're doing something very hard. And it has to be your goal. Then you share very carefully and deliberately with people who will hold you accountable. And you have several coaches. You've got all kinds of people around you who know your goals, right? I'm just one of many people who know your goals. And so that also keeps you going. And then you become that person by virtue of acting as if I'm going to be this person. Other people know my goal. And at that point, it's starting to become a crowd reaction and an accountability situation. And along the way, you learn about yourself, how you got through that obstacle, how you went to do that. How long is your longest training bike ride? Just curious.
112 miles,
And
which
how many
is
hours?
the race distance, but I'll do
Yeah.
a couple of centuries and then I'll most likely will get 112 in before a race.
Wow. So on the way, actually, I'll use you as a guinea pig. When you did your first century as training, did you learn after you finished it what you would do to do future training rides that were that long?
Certainly. Absolutely. And I was fortunate enough that this was an event. So the Reston Bike Club puts on a century ride around the time that you're peaking for like an August or September Ironman race. It's timed very well here
Oh.
locally.
Mhm.
Um, the nice thing about it is you get the ride finished. The other nice thing about it is they've got these great convenience stations where every 25 miles, you kind of stop and you get off your bike and you have a chit chat. And so theoretically, you get the distance in, but
Right.
it's really not exactly like race day because race day, you're just flying through aid stations or you got all your gear
Wow.
packed on your bike. But for me, it's like looking down at my Garmin and saying, yeah, I hit 100 miles today. That is an achievement that tells me that, you know what, I could probably get 112 in tomorrow or when the
Right.
race is after I've done my swim and then go do my run. But that
Right.
century mark for me, like talking about goal setting, hitting that first time I hit a century on my own was a milestone in my training for sure.
What did you think of yourself that was different? Or what did you say to yourself that was different after you hit that first milestone of the first century you did on your own?
Yeah, it's really I can do this, right? It's an
I can do
you can
this. Yeah.
actually, okay, if I can do 100, and then I could probably get 112 or I could get 150 or, but it's
Right.
sort of, and it's another interesting thing in my training. And as I ramp, I will only change one element in my, so let's continue about talking about the bike. So let's say I did 50 miles last weekend. Well, this weekend, I'm not going to add mileage and add elevation, right? I'm going to add one or the other. I find that
Huh.
if I add two different elements to my training load, I'm going to have an injury or have bonk or my nutrition is going to have
Right.
issues.
Right.
So I'm
And
very
you learned that,
systematic. I've
right?
learned that
You
the hard way. That's right.
learning goal. You learned how to do that, and now it's become a checklist.
That's right.
Love it. Great example. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, you're great. Just changing focus to the audience. I think I'm looking at the chat. I don't know if the chat is live. I hope it is. If the audience has any questions or want to interact with Caroline and I, please feel free. Like, as I said at the beginning, the purpose of this is small bite-size bits of content that you can absorb in a 30-minute window. I
Mhm.
do love the long version of shows and podcasts, but it takes up a lot of time. So I'll probably start wrapping this up unless we've got an audience member that wants to throw out a question. Assuming I know how to field it. I am looking at my studio, so if something pops up, it will, or just say hi.
Yeah,
And
just say hi.
again, yeah, and
I had
again, if
something I
you,
want. Yeah,
yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead, go for it. No, you
No,
go.
what I wanted to say is I think we have to really focus on who knows about our big goals because there is a great example you can look up on YouTube, which is a guy called Bottle Claus. It's a man in Germany who became Eliud Kipchoge's bottle guy in the Berlin Marathon. And that's when he broke the world record in 2022. And this was the guy who trained to pass him his bottles of nutrition. And there's no way he could have set the world record that day unless he had somebody who had trained to hand him his bottles of nutrition and do it seamlessly so he didn't lose extra seconds. So what's so so fascinating is that when you have other people who are sculpting you by supporting you and giving you the ability to succeed at your big goal, it is called the Michelangelo effect. So they sculpt you by doing things, giving you feedback, allowing you to continue to see yourself as that person who's going to finish, that person who's going to set that world record. Choose carefully when you have a big endurance goal, because the role other people can and do play is beyond huge, and you just have to be really thoughtful about it. Find the right people, because they'll help you achieve your goal.
That's really, it's like, what came to mind as I heard a presentation. I think the team was Cervelo. They're talking about the Tour de France, and they were at some stage in the Tour de France where their cyclist could take first place during this stage of the Tour de France. And the amount of detail that they had on when this rider would get his bottles, when he gets his food,
Wow.
and basically, like, if he missed a handoff, the day was done, right? Like, his bike was so sort of lean and ready to go that if he missed one of the handoff, it was an incredible story that I have to find and
Wow.
repost on the internet. But to your point, there's like us athletes that are out there who we look up to these pros, and the amount of community and protection and
Yeah.
technology that they have is mind blowing. And I'm just trying to get a little piece of that, right? And if you think about how I
Yeah.
train now versus how I trained 10 years ago, I'm almost using tools that pros were using 10 years ago. And now it's kind of come down to the average amateur,
Huh.
and it's allowing us to achieve bigger, brighter, harder goals just because, like, we're
Right.
more dialed in on our nutrition. I've got a cycling coach. I've got this. I've got that. And it's just refined, refined, refined.
And on the other side of those investments, so that's the I in the bridge methodology. On the other side of those investments, do you feel like it's always a worthy investment for you?
Oh, eventually, I think.
Hmm.
But there's a ton of things that I've put money into. My swim erg machine, for one, that I invested in that I don't really, I mean, there's things that, and that's the other challenge with us type of athletes. Like, you see the shiny new penny, it comes across your
Yeah.
Instagram feed, and it's like, oh, I definitely need that. Let's buy it. Let's buy
Yeah.
it. Let's buy
Yeah.
it. And, I've got boxes of nutrition that I haven't, because I'm sort of dialed in on what I want to be using.
Hmm.
Um, but so I think the answer to your question is yes and no.
But you learn in the process. You learn in the process. So even if you've done lots of different Ironman competitions, whatever, Iron Women, Ironman, what, I think everybody can see themselves as an endurance athlete if that's their goal. I think there's always going to be something you start at the top of the brainstorming with, even though I've done this 9 other times, what's new? What new technology? Why is baking soda suddenly embedded in gel and being talked about after the last Olympics? What's new? Because there's probably something you can tweak and do even better. And I think you're really good at looking around and being creative with what else is out there that would help me succeed. So I think that's something people have to keep in mind is don't just do the same thing every single time. Look at your checklist and say, is there a way to be more efficient or effective on any of these steps?
That's well said. I didn't see anything come across the chat, so that's either a technology challenge on my end, or we do have viewers, so I know there's an audience out there. But any parting words, Caroline, for the new endurance athlete who's trying to, set a world record in 6 months at Ironman World Championships?
Um, well, okay. So there's a reason why SMART goals are called zombie goal theories, is because when you use the R in realistic or even attainable, it's been found that people can undermine their ability to do really hard things. So think of this as big goals that might feel unrealistic and might feel unattainable. But if it's your goal and you're surrounded by a support system, go for it. We know at the end of every single day, people scan their day for what they did that day that was hard. And because if you're doing hard things, you first time endurance athletes out there, you're always going to be building this confidence, self-confidence, and self-efficacy at the end of the day. Because honestly, that's the only way people build it is by doing hard things. Good for you for choosing a big goal that may feel unattainable to somebody else. But, go for it anyway, because there's no other way to build the confidence and self-esteem that actually comes with doing hard things.
Wonderful. Well, Caroline, thank you for being with us today. And audience members, please send us some comments, your thoughts on the show. Please tune in next week, same time, same place. We'll have Rebekah Keat. She's a 6-time world champion, Ironman world champion. And we're going to be talking about swim strategy, what it feels like to be in an open water versus having nice black line at the bottom of the pool. So that's our show. That's our conversation. Thanks for participating. Caroline, it's always good to see you. And
Great to
we'll
see you.
see everybody out there.
Thank you.
Done. Awesome.
I'm going to hit, should I hit leave?